Good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Thanks for being here. We begin with new developments this morning in the special counsel's investigation into the events surrounding the 2020 presidential election.
We are getting new insight from witnesses who've been interviewed by the special counsel regarding former President Trump's alleged efforts to overturn the election. One of them is Richard Donahue. He served as acting deputy attorney general near the end of Trump's presidency. Also, former NYPD Commissioner Bernard Kerik has turned over thousands of pages of documents to Jack Smith's office. He worked with Rudy Giuliani to try to uncover alleged voter fraud. All this comes just 1 week after Trump first revealed he had received a letter, a target letter from special counsel Jack Smith, indicating a possible indictment is coming. For his part, Trump has denied any wrongdoing and has continued on the campaign trail. A fundraiser is planned for today in New Orleans, with more stops scheduled in Iowa and Pennsylvania later this week. NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley is following it all for us this morning. Ryan, a lot to get to here, so let's start with Richard Donahue. He is a former Trump DOJ official. Remind us, why is he important, and what can you tell us about his meeting with the special counsel?
So I think Richard Donahue is probably best known for the burn that he had against Jeffrey Clark during one of these critical meetings. Jeffrey Clark was the individual who Donald Trump wanted to install. He was an environmental lawyer at the Justice Department with absolutely zero criminal experience at all, and believed a lot of these bizarre conspiracy theories about the election, including the notion that it was hacked by thermostats from China. So some really out there things. And Richard Donahue was also getting a lot of this information from the White House, some more bizarre conspiracy theories involving, Italy and IP addresses and all sorts of internet garbage, essentially, that was being passed along. But Richard Donahue, during one of these meetings where Jeffrey Clark was sort of speaking up, said, essentially, because he was an environmental lawyer, why don't you go back to your office and we'll call you when there's an oil spill? So a nice little burn he got in there against Jeffrey Clark, the individual who Donald Trump wanted to make the Attorney General of the United States. And he knows a lot, and Richard Donahue knows a lot about what was coming in from Mark Meadows, what was being sent along, what the White House wanted the Justice Department to investigate. A lot of these bizarre conspiracy theories that were being sent along.
Let's talk about another name that has surfaced, former NYPD Commissioner Bernard Kerik. NBC News previously reported that Kerik is expected to meet with the special counsel's office in mid-August. Now we know he's turned over thousands of pages of documents. How is he involved in all this, and what do we know about those documents?
Yeah, so a lot of these documents have to do with the investigation that was being, so-called investigation that was being run and looking into these allegations of voter fraud. And I think that that's going to help, show just basically how they did not have any real evidence here that they were talking about, how any person should have known, looking at this, quote unquote evidence that they presented, that there was not legitimate claims being made, that there was no way that they would ever be able to close the gap, the tremendous gaps that they had in several states, how far they were behind Joe Biden. So, remember what prosecutors have to show here is not that Donald Trump knew that he lost, but he should have known that he lost, that there is enough evidence and that no reasonable person could have looked at this and said, hey, I've actually got, a shot here, or that this is real evidence. And I mean, if you just look at the affidavits, for example, that were being presented, that's something that I think any educated person would be able to figure out.
All right, Ryan Riley breaking it all down for us this morning. Ryan, thank you so much.
Well, tensions are rising at the southern border, where the federal government has officially filed a lawsuit against the state of Texas over the construction of a buoy barrier in the Rio Grande. According to the lawsuit filed by the Justice Department, Texas officials violated federal regulations by not getting authorization to install the barrier from Congress. The floating wall is intended to deter migrants from crossing the border illegally. It's equipped with wrecking ball-sized buoys and 1,000 feet of barbed wire. Governor Abbott sent President Biden a letter on Monday ahead of the lawsuit saying, quote, Texas will see you in court, Mr. President. In the meantime, Texas will fully utilize its constitutional authority to deal with the crisis you have caused. Vice President Kamala Harris spoke last night, calling the buoy wall inhumane.
Across our nation, extremist so-called leaders demonize, target, and attack immigrants. In Texas, we see reports that authorities have pushed children and pregnant women who crossed the Rio Grande back into the river people who refuse to provide water to other human beings who are in deadly 100-degree heat. Inhumane, outrageous, and un-American.
The buoy barrier is the latest escalation in Governor Abbott's mission to increase security at the border under his Operation Lone Star plan. Critics, though, say his tactics are unnecessary given the drop in the number of border encounters and crossings this year. NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley joins us now for more on this. Hey, Julia, good morning. So we just previewed a little bit of what Abbott's response was to this lawsuit and showed some of that letter. Did we get any idea of what the legal argument, though, is that the state plans to present in court?
Well, I think that that letter really shows how they think that they are within their authority as a state trying to protect their own interests, whether it be taxpayer interest or otherwise, that they somehow then have the authority to step in and implement this immigration law. But I think that that's going to be a very hard argument to stand up in court because immigration is a federal law, and it's not clear that any of these efforts are really protecting those interests. They're spending billions on this effort. It's a 1,000-foot buoy wall. It's not that they're, kind of cordoning off their entire state. They're really just making it more dangerous for migrants to cross. And it's not clear that it's really done anything to bring down overall immigration numbers, which, by the way, are at some lows. They're at the lowest point they've been since the first month that Biden took office. So it's going to be interesting to see how this stands in court. Previously, we've seen a lot of states, usually led by Texas and other Republican-led states, suing the Biden administration over their immigration policies. Now the shoe's on the other foot. We'll see where this ultimately lands. It could be that they have a friendly to Texas judge when they start. If this ultimately goes to the Supreme Court, as so many of these immigration cases do, it'll be interesting to see where the Supreme Court lands when they ultimately do want to give power to presidents, and especially a future administration, to be able to implement immigration law. But they also do want to look at states' rights. And so it'll be interesting to see how this case ultimately plays out. But I think it's especially really a political one as we move further into 2024. This is going to be really kind of the picture of the fight here, and whether people think that immigration is something where immigrants need to be kept out at all cost, or whether they need to be welcomed into this country and given humane treatment. And this case perfectly lays that out.
Julia, I do want to talk a little bit about the Biden administration's response to all this and addressing the lawsuit. They did so during a briefing yesterday. First, let's listen to some of that.
What you see the governor doing is dangerous and unlawful, and it's actually hurting the process. It's hurting the process of what we're trying to do. And instead of wanting to, or undermining, I should say, instead of coming to the table and trying to figure out a way to work together, he continues to do this really cruel, unjust, inhumane ways of moving forward with a system that has been broken for decades.
So, Julia, setting the lawsuit aside for a moment, is there anything else that the Biden administration might do that we might see happen, just removing the barrier, let's say, without suing Abbott or without seeing how that progresses?
I don't think that's a showdown they're willing to have in the water. Or at least we haven't seen any indications that they're going to come in and physically take away what is the state of Texas property. But, they could surge more resources, more. It's all happening in this one area of Eagle Pass, Texas. They could surge more Border Patrol there to try to, dilute the number of Texas state troopers who are already there. They could do more to monitor some of these claims that we've already seen of inhumane treatment. It'll be interesting to see how this one really remote part of the state of Texas becomes a big picture of the immigration fight nationally.
All right, Julia Ainsley, thank you so much.
Now to a stunning revelation in the Carly Russell kidnapping investigation. Police announced yesterday that Russell has come clean about her disappearance and admitted that she was never kidnapped at all. In a statement, her attorneys say Russell never left the Hoover, Alabama area. Her lawyers added that Russell apologizes for what she has done, and she asked for prayers for the public. Hoover police say they are now discussing potential criminal charges in the case. This morning, folks in the Midwest and Northeast are bracing for extreme heat as that heat dome covering much of the country expands.
Yeah, it's expected to bring some of the year's hottest temperatures to those regions by the end of the week. And all this comes as the Earth really as a whole is on track to experience its hottest July, possibly its hottest single month ever recorded. NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa joins us now from Minneapolis. Hey, Maggie, good morning. So I know people in Minnesota are used to the cold, not so much this totally extreme heat that's headed their way later this week. I know Joe can speak more to that than I can, but how high are temperatures expected to get there and how are they preparing?
So basically, over the next couple of days, temperatures are expected to kind of top out around 97 or 98. And for reference, just as to how rare it is, tomorrow the daily high, guys, is 100. So this very well could hit that high, tie it, that record high, or potentially break it. But either way, again, as you said, exceptionally hot, 10 to 20 degrees higher than the average across much of the Midwest. And people are preparing here just like they prepare elsewhere. We're standing on a lakeside beach here in Minneapolis. This is expected to be packed. Places like the Salvation Army and other kind of outreach groups like that help out, more vulnerable people and potentially unhoused people. They're opening up cooling centers. And of course, guys, after seeing what's been happening in the Midwest, we also anticipate hospitals are bracing for potential heat-related illnesses as this heat wave, as you said, expands from much of the country.
Maggie, let's talk about Phoenix. Phoenix expects heat, but nothing like this. It just saw its 25th day of temperatures recorded over 110 degrees. That was yesterday. We're seeing an uptick in severe burns actually caused by contact with the hot ground. What are doctors saying about that?
Those are insane. I mean, doctors are basically saying that we're talking about severe and, in their words, potentially life-threatening burns, third-degree burns. Yeah, just from people touching the ground in Phoenix amid this ongoing heat wave. And here's more of kind of what one doctor had to tell our affiliate about that.
And the severity of these burns in association with heat shock and heat prostration and dehydration is just really off the charts right now.
And guys, as if that's not alarming enough, doctors also telling reporters that this summer, amid this heat wave, they are treating, they say, 2 to 3 more times more patients, 2 to 3 times more than they do in a typical summer. So even for Phoenix, even for people that, unlike Minnesotans, are used to this is incredibly extreme, guys.
Maggie, just quickly before I let you go, it's becoming increasingly clear, according to research, we have a new report out about the fact that these heat waves are linked to climate change that we're seeing across the world here. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, a new report basically saying these heat waves flat out would not be possible without the man-made climate crisis that we're talking about. Our own researchers, our climate team here at NBC, also pointing out, as you said at the top, Earth right now on track to experience its hottest July, quite possibly its hottest single month ever recorded. And of course, experts say, and we know, but it's worth reiterating, this is expected to get much, much worse unless humans make a drastic change. Guys.
All right, Maggie Vespa, thank you very much. Stay safe.
So what exactly can we expect the rest of the week? Let's get a check on your Morning News Now forecast.
That means Michelle Grossman is with us today. Details on how this could all be impacting your week. Hey, Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, guys. And we're going to see that dangerous heat continuing into the Northeast as we go throughout the next couple of days. So really, most of us will be above normal, with the exception of the Pacific Northwest, above normal temperatures. And take a look at some of these numbers, because it is dangerous coast to coast. We're looking at 285 million Americans over the next 7 days seeing temperatures at 90 degrees or above. And then even worse, 50 million Americans seeing temperatures over 100 degrees the next 7 days. That's a lot of people, mainly confined to the South Central states, the Southwest states, but even into portions of the plains as well. This is what it looks like this morning. Heat alerts, 41 million people impacted. This number will grow over the next several days. We're looking at heat advisories. That's in the orange color, from the South Central states into the Central Plains, even into the Northern Plains. So Pierre to Omaha, Wichita, Dallas, Corpus Christi, and then an excessive heat warning. That's for Phoenix. And we're going on a month and a half of really brutal temperatures there. So expanding heat, that's the big weather story this week. Once again, triple digits in so many spots. Las Vegas, Albuquerque, Lubbock, Dallas, Wichita. But look at Rapid City, 96 degrees. It's going to feel like the 90s. 92 in Des Moines. It's going to feel like 97. St. Louis will feel like over 100 degrees there. Then as we go throughout tomorrow, there it goes. It spreads off to the east. So Buffalo, New York, 88 degrees. Baltimore, 90. 93 in Cincinnati. And we still have triple digits. Oklahoma City, 101. But you're going to feel closer to 103. That's going to be the big story of the East Coast. You factor in that humidity, it's going to feel worse than it is averages. D.C. Thursday, Friday, Saturday in the mid to upper 90s. St. Louis, we're into the triple digits as well. But look at this. You factor in the humidity, it's going to feel like 105 in D.C. on Friday, feeling like 100 on Thursday. That's the heat story. Then, of course, that heat is going to spark some storms in portions of the northern plains, also the mid-Atlantic. With any of these storms that we've seen over the past few weeks, we could see some really heavy downpours that could lead to some flash flooding. So the mid-Atlantic, where you see the yellow, D.C., Salisbury, Maryland, we're looking at 11 million people at risk across the country today for winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour. Guys, we could see some hail as well. Low chance for tornadoes, but not zero. So we'll follow this as we go throughout the afternoon as well. Back to you.
All right, Michelle, thank you so much.
All right, well, today the Federal Reserve will start a two-day meeting over interest rate hikes. And tomorrow we should know if those rates will go up and by how much.
Yeah, this comes as inflation worries have started to cool down, currently at 3%, down about 3%, the lowest we've seen in more than 2 years. Editor-in-chief at Investopedia, Caleb Silver, joined us now with what to expect. So first of all, the big question, should we expect a rate hike? If so, what's it going to look like?
Absolutely. About 0.25%, and this could be one last time, the last time in this long interest rate hike campaign that began in early 2022. Expect a 0.25 point hike. That'll put the Fed funds rate at between 5.5% and 5.75%. We haven't been there in a very long time, but this could be it. The Fed's probably going to hold rates here for a while and then potentially start cutting them in 2024.
So, yeah, walk us through what we could see ahead. You know, if people are like, OK, one more, what does that mean? Are we going to see it go up again? And when might that happen?
Yeah, probably not going to go up again because inflation has come down so meaningfully. Back in July of last year, inflation was at 9.1%. It has come down steadily. Still high prices for shelter, especially rent. Still high prices for food, especially dining out, because there's a lot of demand there. But inflation in general has come down. A lot of that is gas prices, but it still had a huge effect on the things we finance. We're talking about mortgages at a 7.2% for the 30-year. New car loans between 7 and 14% to buy a new car. And the average credit card APR, 24%. Wow. Those are very high rates.
Goodness.
So folks want those to start to go down, but it's still going to be a little bit then.
And they will, because these are very interest rate sensitive loans. So even before the Fed starts cutting, these rates are going to start to come down. Watch in the third quarter here and into the last quarter of the year, you're going to see those loans come down meaningfully. Hopefully that'll stir up appetite in the housing market, the new car market, and people will get their credit card spending under control because we are at record highs in credit card debt.
It's not just the Federal Reserve here in the U.S. Really, across the world right now, we're seeing interest rate decisions. What are we seeing across the globe? What does it look like as far as the economic standpoint?
In Europe, inflation has been very sticky high, much higher than here and harder to come down. It's a Eurozone economy. There's a bunch of countries in there. So they're going to keep hiking rates today and probably in their next meeting. Bank of Japan as well. But the U.S. is probably hitting that terminal rate. So this could be it. One last time, as they say. And then we're going to stay here for a bit and then come down towards the end of the year, early next year.
All right, Caleb Silver breaking it down for us. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Always, we appreciate you. Well, protests in Israel are intensifying after the country's parliament passed a controversial bill. It limits the power of the Supreme Court to overturn government decisions. The move is part of a broader judicial overhaul by Israel's far-right government. Critics say it will give the ultra-nationalists and religious parties that make up the government unchecked power to shape policy. NBC News foreign correspondent Raf Sanchez joins us from Tel Aviv with more on this. Hey, Raf, good morning. So what are the protests like today? We also understand doctors there are striking in response. Tell us what you're seeing.
Yeah, Savannah, good morning. The protests continue, the divisions continue, and this is what the front page of all the major Israeli newspapers look like today. It is all black, and it just says in small letters at the bottom there, a dark day for Israeli democracy. Now, this is an ad paid for by a tech organization aligned with the protesters, but it expresses the feeling of a lot of people in Israel today. As you said, those protests continuing overnight. Demonstrators were blocking major roads, police using water cannon to try to dislodge them. One woman we spoke to yesterday, she had tears in her eyes. She said she did not know what she is going to tell her children about their country's future. But Savannah, it is worth saying there is another perspective on this, that of Netanyahu and his allies. The prime minister saying last night this was a necessary reform to curb the power of unelected judges and make it so that the democratically elected government could carry out the agenda that the people wanted them to. The doctors' union, as you said, is also on strike today, which means it is almost impossible to get anything other than emergency health care in Israel today. Wow. Savannah.
What a visual, Raf, there with that newspaper ad. Tell us, so how are opposition leaders planning to challenge this new law? I mean, is there any chance the Supreme Court strikes it down?
Yeah, we're really kind of entering uncharted constitutional waters here. The opposition has gone to the Supreme Court and they have asked the judges there to strike down the law weakening the Supreme Court. And nobody, Savannah, from Netanyahu to the constitutional scholars we speak to the protesters on the streets, knows what happens if the court does that. This country could be facing a full-blown constitutional crisis at that point. It's going to be at least a couple of weeks before we understand whether the court is taking up the petition, what kind of speed it is moving toward on in terms of the case. But it is a very deeply divided country in Israel right now, probably more divided than in any other point in its 75-year history.
And Raf, back here in the U.S., I understand we got some reaction from the White House yesterday. What is the Biden administration saying about all this?
Yeah, it's been really unusual watching the White House regularly weighing in on what you could argue is the internal politics of an American ally. Before the vote, President Biden pleading with Prime Minister Netanyahu to hit pause on this legislation, not to go through with it given the divisions. I want you to take a listen to what the White House press secretary had to say yesterday after the vote passed.
It is unfortunate that the vote today took place with the slimmest possible majority. The United States, we will continue to support the efforts of President Herzog and other Israeli leaders as they seek to build a broader consensus through political dialogue. That's what we're going to continue to support, and we understand that the conversation is ongoing.
Now, Savannah, you heard discontent there from the White House. What you notably did not hear is any threats from the White House that it would take any action on this, including potentially cutting off military aid to Israel. Savannah.
All right, Raf Sanchez, thank you very much.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.